read, and I told her, we would pick her up if she was coming, but something else is going on tonight, so she won't be here.
Okay.
So I don't know.
And I think Kenny said he's running a few minutes late.
Oh, that's
So, shock.
horrible. Shock with that.
All right. Yeah, so talked to Paula and Stacy. They were thinking about coming, but something came up. So, it'd be good to see them if they make it. And we'll see. I'm trying to stream. I got here early to make sure it worked. It was working fine. Now it's not.
Now it's not, yeah, because class, it's fixing to start, so.
You know how it goes.
The cloud moved, so.
Yeah. So it's tough. And I can't tell if it's my phone or if it's the cell phone. So, but if you want to get a head start, we'll be at Mark chapter 1 verses, we'll be starting at 16. Yep.
It's there.
Which is good. I've had a real good time just studying. I've got a bunch of different commentaries I've been looking at and different thoughts, and sending me your questions, which is super helpful. Kenny sent me some last night, although he's looking ahead, so that's he was in chapter 4, which at this rate may be like 2023 by the time we get there.
March, April, maybe.
So we'll see.
Yeah, but when you take time to dissect it like this, for me, it's very helpful.
Yeah.
Even though it may be slowing somebody else down, you think we need to do that. But
Yeah, I can see that.
what do you overlook if you really speed up?
I like both. I mean, sometimes it's good to see like the bigger picture and kind of fly over it faster. Mm-hmm. But then I do think, when looking down at every, particular aspect and kind of mulling it over in your mind, I mean, you can extract some real gems, I think. Yeah. And I think we'll come to some today that may not be at first glance obvious. This thing keeps sliding down. So I'm excited. And it's...
And for me, a lot of times when I'm reading, I do that super fast read, so I don't really absorb a lot.
Yeah.
Doing it this way, helps me.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people could say that they've read the Bible, but how many people could say they've actually studied the whole thing?
Exactly.
And that's two different things.
Yep.
So, I'm enjoying it, and like I say in Sunday school, I wish I could give you half of what I get. So, I wasn't kidding. That you get out what you put in. Okay.
But like Carol and I were talking coming over here, there's other places in the Bible that, the other Gospels, where Jesus said, put your nets down and follow me, or whatever. And it's like, well, let me go bury my dead father.
Yeah.
Or let me go tell my family bye. Or let me, whatever,
Yeah.
Jesus is like, no, put all that stuff aside, come follow me.
It is I think we'll find some things about Jesus that we don't really talk about on Sunday morning. Some of his aspects, especially coming into here, if we get there, in verses 21, where he commands the unclean spirit to come out. He says, be quiet. And in fact, throughout like the first, third or half of the book, Jesus is commanding not to tell who I am, which is kind of an interesting way of doing things, right? So, but we'll talk about that some more. Okay, I have no idea if this is going to work. We're going to let it go, see what happens. Not real sure. Hopefully the audio's coming through.
You got a 50-50 shot.
But I am recording it. There's only so much I can do. We do the best we can. So, all right. Well, let's get started. Were there any questions before we move on? Were there any questions from the last session that we need to address before we move forward? Okay. All right. Well, let's get started. Well, here's Tiffany. She's asking me, am I streaming? yes, but it's terrible. So, what can I do? All right. Let's read this next section. We'll be reading from Mark chapter 1, verses 16 through verses 20. And it says, "As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. 'Come, follow me,' Jesus said, 'and I will send you out to fish for people.' At once they left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little further, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat, preparing their nets. And without delay he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat with the hired men and followed him." So, probably a fairly straightforward passage. Did anybody extract anything, any nuggets of wisdom from that, just reading it?
I don't know about nuggets of wisdom, but like I asked you, now, it doesn't say, and I don't remember if any of these people had families or other responsibilities other than just being fishermen, so getting up and following Jesus was probably no big deal to them. But, if, like I asked you, if you were a family man and you had to survive, provide for your family, would that be so easy?
No. The answer is no. I like this. I like this discussion, and you sent me these questions. That's really the first one. How difficult would it be for you or anyone to drop a paying job that pays the bills? To blindly go and follow someone you may not be sure of? That's the question, right?
Right.
So, me personally, I'm a little more conservative. I have family, I have mouths to feed. I'm going to play it super safe, right? Even if I hate my job, I'm still going to suck it up because I got mouths to feed. When they grow up, or before kids, I probably would have been more adventurous, right? But that's not where I'm at right now. And I think anybody would have these same kind of feelings. Maybe not. It kind of depends on the individual, but I think they would have these same thoughts, for sure. And what we're doing is we're putting ourselves in the story, right? We're reading into these human emotions that aren't there, right? None of this is said there. They're just, he's walking along. Like if we follow the word specifically, he's walking along, he calls them, they get up and follow him, right? So we're reading into the text, right? And I think that's a good thing. And I think we also need to be careful because we don't want to read too much into the text, right? It's kind of that fine balance. But I think you're right. I think anybody would have those questions in their mind. Now, let's look at the text a little more closely because I think there are some nuggets here for us to look at, and I think this will answer some of this question right now. Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee. That's pretty self-explanatory. We don't. And he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Okay, so makes sense. He's walking beside the Sea of Galilee. Plenty of people fish. He sees these fishermen, right? We've got this story set up. What's not said here is Mark is picking up after Jesus has already started his ministry. So we start with John, or we start with him walking down the Jordan River to be baptized by John the Baptist, right? Well, then we're back up in the Sea of Galilee. So we talked about that the probable site of his baptism was near the bottom, near the Red Sea. So at this point, he's back up at the top. So one of the things I want you to notice is these are Gospels. They're not biographies. We've skipped some time here between the last part and this part. He had to travel back from the bottom all the way up to the top. And we know he spent some time out there because he was in the wilderness being tempted. So there is some time period between. So it's recorded in John, I think it's, where'd my notes go? Here we are. John 1:35, let's flip over there. John 1:35. Okay, so the next day, John was there again with two of his disciples. So this is John the Baptist that we're talking about. When he saw Jesus passing by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." When the two disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. Turning around, Jesus saw them following and asked, "What do you want?" They said, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" "Come," he replied, "and you will see." So they went and saw where he was staying, and they spent the day with him. It was about 4 p.m. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the two that heard John and had said, and who had followed Jesus. The first thing Andrew did was to find his brother Simon and tell him, "We have found the Messiah," that is the Christ, and he brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is, when translated, Peter. So, actually, when we come to this verse in 16, Jesus actually already seen them once. So, if you're trying to harmonize these Gospels, which is where you're taking the 4 Gospels and kind of putting them in order, right, beside each other, you'll see that John's account follows first. So he's already interacted with them, done something else, and now he's come back. So that adds a little more complexity to the story, because if we, without the full picture, without the context, we may think that, well, Jesus just walked by and called them, and there they go.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like.
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah.
And I tried to go back to Matthew and
Yeah.
look into,
Yeah. So there is some interesting context. Now think about that. Like, what are the consequences if you believe that, well, Jesus can just walk by and say, "Come follow me," and people go?
See, I was wondering what Zebedee was thinking. You know, he's there with his sons. You know, they're getting ready to go out and fish with some hired hands, and all of a sudden both his sons just walk off with Jesus, and he's sitting there going, you know.
Okay.
I mean, this is kind of, you know.
Yeah. No, that's a great observation. Zebedee,
You know, why did he not tell Zebedee to come on too?
good question. Good question. Oh, well, we're gonna step into that in just a second. We're gonna step into, that question, which will probably be the bulk of our discussion tonight. What are the consequences of having this belief that by Jesus just called people and blindly they just followed him, versus now that we know a little background information, he already had some interaction with them. In fact, now that we know that they were also John's disciples and that they went and spent time with Jesus, how does that change your perspective on what these two men did?
Well, I mean, if they had a pre-notion of who Jesus was, I'm sure that helped them their decision as far as just leaving and following him.
Okay, so it answers some of the questions that we have about, would there have been any hesitation, right? So by previously knowing somebody, we're probably getting rid of some of that hesitation, previously answering. Hey, Kenny. Robin. So that's a mic. We're trying to pick up the peanut gallery. So just speak up. We'll try to capture it. So it answers some of that question about hesitation, right? It answers some of our question about blind faith. I am of the opinion that Jesus has never called anybody to blindly follow him. He's always had some kind of relationship or evidence or reason why. Like with these guys, like he's already talked to them. They've already interacted at some point. And of course, what we're not seeing is Jesus. If you read the rest of John, Jesus hasn't been sitting still, right? He's been kind of walking around preaching, doing his thing already, and they're aware of this. Okay, so they already know what's going on. So that kind of gives us a fuller picture of these guys just, oh, hey, you two, come with me. You know, right? It doesn't work like that.
Right.
It doesn't work like that at all. And then we see down here, your observation, he saw James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat preparing their nets. And without delay, he called them, and he left their father in the boat. So it's kind of rough, right?
Yeah.
Like, you got stuff to do, right? He's fixing it. You're just going to abandon me here, son? Right?
Yeah.
I'm a father. Hey, I fed you. You get over here and fix this net. We got dinner, right? So there is another key observation here is, what are you going to do? There's a calling, right? This is Jesus' calling of his initial disciples. And you got to make a choice. Both of these groups, the first two and the second two, the first group's out fishing, actively fishing, and it says, what's the wording? At once, they left their nets and followed him. We talked about that word immediately that Mark's like to use. This is another translation of this. Eutheos, at once, immediately. It means immediately. They left their nets and followed him. Nets aren't cheap. It's a sign. It's a sign of how immediate and how decisive this decision was. They left, what it's really saying is they left their way of life. Right? It'd be like me leaving computers, right? It's a big deal. It's a sign. I'm committed. Same thing with the next guy. They left their father. Nothing against the father, but it's a sign of commitment. You will leave your sons will leave their fathers and mothers to cleave to their wife, right? Well, who's the bride of the church? Jesus Christ. So there's a commitment, right? This is what that's signifying. And nothing against the father. Why didn't he call the father? It's a good question. We don't know. It's just not who he called.
Or was it because his father had a wife and maybe a family that Jesus didn't want to pull? I don't know.
You know, it's possible. He was already committed to his family. These guys are, well, I can't even say that. These guys weren't as maybe established in their ways, right? Like the father has hired men, which means that he's pretty good at fishing. He's been doing it for a while. So he's kind of established in that. Maybe he just knew that he didn't have the freedom. Maybe he knew something about Zebedee's heart. You know, and it's nothing against Zebedee. I mean, out of all the people, he picked 12. So, you know, it's just what he did.
Yeah. And were any of those 12 married or had family?
Actually, later on, we'll see, let's see, he comes out of, so verse 29, as they left the synagogue and went out with James and John to the home of Simon and Andrew, Simon's mother-in-law was in the bed. So, yes.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. So we're getting some clarity of the full situation here. Now, let's come back to what I think is probably the more interesting question. Fishermen? Really? Like, okay. You're the president. Well, let's just use Biden, because he's newly elected. He's coming into town. He's setting up his office, his kingdom, his cabinet. And he walks down the street and finds, a guy fishing and be like, hey, you want to be a part of this? You want to be part of what we're doing here? It's going to be great. What? No. It's not the way of man. I'm going to Harvard. I'm going to Yale. I'm finding the smartest people. I'm going down to Silicon Valley. I'm finding the rich people. I'm finding the geniuses, right? Fishermen? I mean, look, nothing against them, but are they prepared to run the kingdom? And in Jesus' case, the kingdom of God? I mean, come on. Really? I mean, let's just explore this for a second. Because there's got to be a reason.
There has to be a reason. I mean, like, Jesus already knew who these guys were. He had to. I would think. And he already knew whether or not they would conform to, well, maybe conform is not maybe the right word, but he knew whether or not they would fit in with what he was doing.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
So he knew something about them that would be more fitting for his mission? Okay, like what? Like, I mean, still, it's a fisherman. Right? Like Zebedee. He's got money. He's got resources. He's got hired people. Let's get him.
Where's his heart?
Cares about heart? You can't do anything with heart.
Well, it's coming to challenge the learned men.
Heart doesn't pay the bills.
The learned men of the day are the ones that are getting everybody in trouble, that Jesus had to come down and fix. So.
Mm. It's a good observation. He could have went to the synagogues, right? He could have been pulling people from there. I mean, these people have been training their entire lives for this, you know.
Does that mean they're right?
Does it?
Does it?
Well, you know, we kind of know, right, a little bit ahead. No, they're not right, but, you know. They should be right. I mean, they trained their entire life for it. And apparently they're so wrong that you got to go find fishermen, right? And I've known fishermen. They're not exactly
Hey.
couth, right? They're not exactly
Hey.
Yeah,
rounded around the edges, you know what I mean? I mean,
yeah, 4 inches goes to 12 inches.
yeah, they're rough. They're rough guys. They're, you know.
I resemble that remark.
Yeah, and I mean, look, but we're just being real, right? This is, if you're looking at it from man's point of view, these are not the guys you pick, right? So you say, and I agree with you, there must be some reason. So let's think of these reasons. And again, let's take some caution. What we're doing is we're reading into the text. It's not actually there. But I think it's left there for us to explore because we are human. And the Bible is coming to us as humans, right? We have these thoughts. We have these, and he's trying to tell us something. So let's explore this for a minute. What properties of fishermen would make them better suited for this God's mission on earth?
They're not
Kenny,
made-
you're looking at me like super confused.
No, I'm just thinking through your
They're hard
thought
working.
process.
And fishing is a lot of patience.
Okay. A lot of patience. Okay. I will agree with that. Patience is, I think, is a virtue of fishing, of good fishermen. I'm a terrible fisherman because I have no patience. I can last about 30 minutes, and then I'm like, I got to catch something or I'm going to the store. But I'm also, my livelihood doesn't depend on it, so there's a difference there too.
I don't know if I'm on your thought process or not, but I think he has chosen the simple things of this world to confound the wise. He didn't choose the scribes and the Pharisees to be disciples.
Mm-hmm.
He chose what some call uneducated fishermen. I tend to disagree with that. I think they were
Some.
very educated, maybe not,
I think most people would say that.
yeah, well-versed in college, but I think they knew the way of the world, knew how things
Okay,
worked.
so they had some street smarts, we could say.
They didn't have formal training, but they had training.
Yeah, they had street smarts. They knew what the real world was like out there. Okay, the simpler things of the world to confound the wise. That's a little bit ahead of what I was thinking, but I like that. We'll come back to it in just a second because that's like the next layer up
Sorry.
of what I'm thinking. Okay, anything else? Any other properties of fishermen that would make them better?
They're dedicated.
Dedicated, so perseverance in the task. Okay, I like that. Yeah, I think that's great. What about communication? Aren't fishermen known for their storytelling? Right? 4 inches turns to 12 inches, turns to like a monster shark. right? And you were reeling in all day. Come on, David. Come on. You know, you caught a goldfish, and it's like a 30-pound tuna. And
I've never actually done that one.
okay. I mean, but that's just something that came to my mind. Communication, right? They have to, if their mission of God is to reach out to people, they have to talk to them, right? They have to interact with them. They have to get their attention, right? And storytelling is a skill set. It really, to talk to somebody and keep their attention is a skill. Anything else?
Teamwork.
Teamwork. Okay. Okay. Perseverance, patience, teamwork, communication. All good things. All good things. Now, coming back to Kenny's point, the simple things of the world that confound the wise. Why? I mean, doesn't God want us to be wise?
Wise with what wisdom?
Well, I mean,
They said the Bible tells us wisdom comes from God, and then you've got to.
well, yeah.
Learning.
Okay, so wisdom comes from God, true. But doesn't he want us to have that? In fact, doesn't he tell us to pray for wisdom? Would you think that these fishermen said, if you walked up to them, you said, "Are you wise?" What do you think their answer would be?
Yes.
Yes? I would have thought their answer would have been no. But we're discussing this.
Okay.
So they could have been maybe a little full of themselves and said, "Yes, I am wise." Now, in the culture, they would have been well versed in Jewish history. So they probably, when you say wisdom, they probably would have went to either David or Solomon as a comparison. Right? Solomon is the wisest king that they ever had. I don't know. I mean, maybe they would have said yes. Wise at fishing, maybe. But like wisdom at life. I don't know.
They may have said they were wise and not meant it in an arrogant, well, maybe not in an arrogant way, but, you know, as lay workers that are in the trenches and ditches every day, as to your point a while ago, you know, we can look at our bosses or maybe our senators or whatever and say, they're so detached from the real world.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of people would say, oh, they're so wise, but the layperson said, I've got more sense than any of them, all of them put together.
Yeah, right? I do
So
that all
they-
the time.
You know, that kind of attitude maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Wiser than that, for sure. Sure. But when you think about it, like I know as I get older, maybe the only piece of wisdom I've learned is the more I know is the more I realize I don't know, right?
Yeah.
You know? So, like if you ask me, Clint, do you think you're wise? I'd be like, no. I can get by by the grace of God, but you know, God is wise and he shares his thoughts with me occasionally.
Probably holds true for all of us.
Probably, whether we realize it or not.
Yeah.
But I think that's an attitude we gain the closer we get to God. We may start out thinking we're all knowing.
Okay.
But the more we learn about God, the closer we get to him, the more we realize we don't know.
Okay, so let's follow that thought. The closer we get to God, the more we realize this. Now, where were these guys at?
Just beginning.
They're at the beginning of their journey. They've already started. We talked about that in John. But we're at the point now where Jesus is saying, come with me, right? We're taking that next step. It's time to go from part-time education to full-time, right? I need your full undivided attention. And that's what he's asking. Now, can you do that right up front with somebody brand new that doesn't even know you? No. But Jesus has created this relationship, and now he's stepping up. And if we look at it from a biblical perspective, what we're seeing is a model of discipleship, right? This is what we're called to do, don't forget. So pay attention with what Jesus is doing with people, because this is what we're called to do. Some other thoughts. Fishermen. He says, I will make you, so I use the NIV, which I like most of the time, but it just loses the poetry here. It says, come follow me and I will send you out to fish for people. Oh. Fishers of men, right? I don't know.
Well, that's what mine says, fishers of men.
Yeah, that's the way it should be. NIV breaks it down a little simpler, but fishers of men, that's the way I was raised,
That's what I got.
and that's what I want to hear when I read it. You know, I like the Lord's Prayer. But the NIV, bless it, bless it. I love it for the most part. So, come and I will make you fishers of men. He's telling them something. He's using their occupation to tell them something, what they're going to be doing with him. I will make you fishers of men. What does that mean? What does it mean? Is that what we're doing? What does it mean? What does it mean? There's some imagery here. Oh, we're going to have to go to 10 if we're going to make any progress.
To gather them up and bring them to Christ.
Gather them up and bring them to Christ.
Maybe,
Okay.
I don't know.
Okay. Are we going to bait a hook and throw it out there? What is he trying to say with this concept? Yes, that's it. I agree with that, but I think there's more.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Let's keep digging. Right? We're extracting all the gold we can from this little vein that we found.
Well, wait a minute. The illustration he gives later of them casting the net on the other side of the boat, the net is the gospel.
Okay.
Cast out the net of the gospel to bring them in, to draw them. I don't know if that's where you're.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of where I was going. Let's look at the imagery here, because it talks about nets here, right? So a lot of people will get this imagery of a rod and reel. And again, context. That's not what yes, that's what we think is fishing. I mean, how many of us have actually went net fishing, right? Casting or drag nets. I tried it once. It's hard. I went back to the reel real fast, right? I mean, to cast, there's technique, right? You've got to spin it. It's got to be at like the perfect angle and altitude and force, and like mine just ends up in the water. I tried it a few times. I probably spent half an hour on it. No clue. And I had this like 8-year-old little kid beside me teaching me. It was embarrassing. But there's a technique, right? But he's using a net. So one of the things I wanted to point out is when you're using a net, you're not using bait. I think that's something that's lost today. Because you say, I'm going to make you fishers of men to the outside world. I don't know why this thing keeps dropping. They're going to think of bait, right? They're going to be thinking of hook, a worm, fake bait, but they're going to be thinking of bait, something shiny to attract a fish to a hook so you can reel them in, right? And that gives us a perverted view of the gospel, I think, if you follow that down. Because then you start thinking of, well, how should the church be reaching people? Well, we should be creating things that lure them into the church, right? I mean, that's the logical route that goes, and it's subtle, right? It's subtle, but it's there, and I've seen it. I've seen it in a bunch of different places, whereas the imagery of using this net is, let's back up a second. They're also fishers, which means that they're in water. And water is a symbol as well that we've already seen through baptism. What's the water used for? It's used for cleansing. But there's also this aspect of it, it's like it's a different realm. When we're baptized, right, We lower you into the water, right? Representing the grave, right? But when you're in the grave, where are you at? We're not talking about like the physical grave. We're talking about the spiritual, right? We're leaving your sins in this. You're going down into the spiritual realm, right? Where you can be cleansed with Jesus, right? Because this isn't happening physically. That's not what we're talking about. The water is this idea of like the spiritual realm underneath. And when you look through the water, it's kind of distorted, right? We don't see it. Paul talks about this. We see it like a smoky glass or a dimly, right? We're looking at this spiritual realm and we can see certain things, but it's not exactly clear until we go into it, right? There's some imagery here. When we're casting that net, we're kind of just throwing this net through the spiritual realm to see what comes up. Who's in control there? Is it you? Is it God?
God is in control of the spirit.
There's some interesting concepts there and some different applications when we start to see. Because if we're just dragging our net through this realm, we get what we get. Our job is to throw the net. Isn't that what they did? They've been throwing their net, so Kenny's skipping ahead because he's cheating. But at the end, they're really depressed, and they're like, well, I'm going to go back fishing. And they take their boat, and they take their net, and they throw. And they cast. And they cast. And they cast. Or they were probably, since they were in the boat, they're probably using a drag net. So throwing it out, dragging for a little bit, pulling it up, see what they caught. Nothing. 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 Then they finally see Jesus, and Jesus is like, cast on the other side. Come back with a full thing of fish. The harvest is ready, Jesus said. Who made the harvest, though? God made the rain. He made the seed. It wasn't us. Our job is to cast the net. Our job is to go, gather the wheat. He's allowing us to be part of this process by His grace.
But see, you can cast the net all day long, but if you don't have no bait in it, you're not going to catch anything unless something just gets hung. So to me, in casting that net, you got to have the bait of the gospel of Jesus Christ within that net to reach that person, to open up their eyes to want to seek God, seek Jesus.
Mm.
To me, you can't just cast a net with nothing in it. You got to present that.
So I am no expert fisherman. This is what I know about net casting. I know some people will chum the water, right, to kind of bring fish to them. I've also seen it done without. I've seen people just walk along the shore. The ones that I'm thinking about is using a smalling casting net to catch minnows
Bait fish.
and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
But, it's like big trawling. Big trawlers like you see. You can't chum miles of water, right? They're just throwing the net out there and running it through. Yeah. So maybe it's a
But I think if
it's a
I'm out
concept.
fishing for men,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm presenting that to whomever I might come across,
Mm-hmm.
I got to have more than an empty net in that situation, to me.
So the net, if we're going to take the historical context, right, the net is the gospel. Right? So you're dragging this net through this water. What we're doing here with these videos and the sermons and our outreach, right, that's kind of us reaching out into this community. And we're just...
Well, maybe it's just like how you say
just
you got to
dragging.
throw the net. Maybe it's your presentation.
Maybe we throw the net wrong. Maybe our net is broken. Maybe we haven't been mending our net, right? Which is really, that's what we're doing here, right? So I think that imagery still stands, though, is as we're reaching out to community. And we can cast, if we're to be fishers of men, we can cast 100 times, nothing. And then one day we can cast and catch 1,000 people. We just don't know because it's not up to us. Our job is to cast the net.
We may never.
Does that make sense, Robert?
Yeah.
We may never see the fruits of us casting a net, though. I mean, we can actually kind of chasing a rabbit and kind of going a little bit to the side. But, I mean, yeah, we can present the gospel all day long, but we may not know. We can lay that seed, but we don't know whether or not it actually grows.
It's true. And you're going into a different parable,
But
right?
yeah,
Right? I mean, Jesus is I think of this as a progression of his understanding, right? We're starting with where you're at. You're a fisherman, right? I can use you for this mission, right? Your attributes that you already have, I can use that. Come with me. And then as we get closer, right, and do the work and learn from me, then you're going to start to see a fuller picture of the mission. Because at this point, they don't even know he's the Messiah yet, really. Well, in John tells them this is the Messiah. And whether or not they fully believe that yet or not, I don't know. They obviously thought something. They followed him. But anyway, they're fishers, so we're going to get deeper into it, just as you would with anything else, any other occupation, right? It's not like they were born fishermen. They hung out with their dad, right? They learned the ropes. They learned how to mend a net. Have you seen nets? They're complicated, right? To mend a net, not me. So there's a lot going on here, and what I spent so much time on that for was to show even the subtleness of what we're doing makes an impact. If we don't have a full understanding, it makes an impact of how we go out into the world, right? If we read this one way and we have a faulty notion of our idea of fishing versus actually reading the text and seeing that they're using nets, casting nets, that's a different approach. And is one better than the other? Well, we follow the biblical example. Whether or not the casting method is better or not. Maybe the casting method can get us some big, lunkers, some real big fish. But that's not what God's going for. I was trying to get as many as he can, it appears. So, any other thoughts on that? That's 40 minutes on like 4 verses.
I think they followed him. If you read the other Gospels, when he came into the town, he taught in the synagogues, and many of them looked and said, "Who is this guy? Isn't this so-and-so's son?" But he speaks, he's not just reading the scriptures, he's speaking with authority.
Yeah.
And they recognized that what Jesus was doing in his ministry, there was something more to it than just what they had been hearing.
Yeah.
And I believe these disciples were looking for a Messiah, whether they knew he was it or not. They recognized that there's something more to this Jesus than just what we've been seeing in our religious system.
Yeah.
So maybe that was why they were so eager to say, "Hey, I'm dropping everything and going," and maybe even their father recognized who Jesus was and was proud of their sons for going
Possible.
to be part of the ministry.
I mean, they were obviously looking for something because it says that the first 2 were followers of John, disciples of John ahead of time. So John was doing his part. It says John was making the way clear. So he was getting these guys acquainted, warmed up, whatever you want to call it, prepared to be introduced to Jesus. So, yeah, absolutely. All right. Let's move on to the next section and see how far we get in our 18 minutes left. So starting at verses 21, and we'll be reading through 28, they went to Capernaum, and when the Sabbath came, Jesus went into the synagogue and began to teach. The people were amazed at his teaching, because he taught them as one who had authority, not as the teachers of the law. Just then a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," said Jesus sternly. "Come out of him." The impure spirit shook the man violently and came out of him with a shriek. The people were all so amazed that they asked each other, "What is this? A new teaching? And with authority? He even gives orders to impure spirits, and they obey him." News about him spread quickly over the whole region of Galilee. All right. So Jesus drives out the impure spirit. So they went to Capernaum, which is on the north side of the Sea of Galilee. So if we're following the map, right, he's made his way kind of on that southwestern corner of the Sea of Galilee, and he's kind of made his way to the top at this point. And it's the Sabbath. And so Jesus went into the synagogue, because that's what good Jews do, right? You go to the synagogue on the Sabbath. And Jesus was a Jew, let us not forget. And so he began to teach. So in Jewish culture, typically the way the synagogue would operate is on the Sabbath they would have a reading from the Torah, and then they would, people that wanted to say something or other people would be invited to speak by the rabbi in session. And so Jesus would take this opportunity to teach. And we'll see some more of this later. But he takes the ideas that he's in there, right? He's got the rabbi right beside him, right? The guy in charge of the synagogue. And he's amazing everybody there, right? Because all the good Jews are there. And they're being amazed. And it brings out this interesting question, because he taught them as one who has authority, not as the teachers of the law. I mean, if you read that literally, the teachers of the law didn't have authority. Kind of weird. Why wouldn't they? I mean, they're the head of the religious emporium here in the Jewish state, right? Leaders of the synagogue, why wouldn't they have this authority? I mean, they had the law in their hands. And we see later on that they had a lot of power within inside the society. What does this mean? That's what we're trying to get at.
Well, to me, they didn't have the spiritual power that Jesus did.
Didn't have the spiritual power.
I mean,
Okay. Carol's like, "What is going on?" She's like, "It's a trap. It's a trap."
There's always a trap.
There's always a trap. I know Kenny's just biting at the bit. He's wanting to say something. All right. Anybody?
I mean, were they interpreting the law, or were they just outing the law? Getting out the scroll and reading it?
Well, it does say in other places that they drone on, and they probably were pontificating exquisitely for a very long period of time, right? To puff themselves up, right? That's what the other Gospels say, puffing themselves up. So, yeah, there's probably some of that going on, full of themselves, as we would say.
I think you need to consider, at this time, where was the church at? Where was the synagogue, the religious system at?
Well, we would have been in a Roman-ruled area, so probably Rome.
But it was run by who?
The Roman governors? Is that what you're getting at?
No, the synagogue was
Oh.
run by who?
Uh,
The Pharisees and the scribes.
mm-hmm.
And it was a very corrupt system.
Okay.
Remember just about Jesus' whole ministry, you old generation of vipers, you hypocrites. He kept just hammering
Yeah.
the scribes and Pharisees because of their false teachings, because they may have knew the law, but they didn't know the lawgiver.
Yeah.
Okay, he knew the lawgiver, so he spoke with authority. They were up there just reciting the law mainly for their own benefit, to make money, to have power, whatever. They're in it for all the wrong reasons to me. That's what I'm seeing. And it's interesting to me. I know I'm getting ahead. But where was this guy with the unclean spirit?
He was in the church,
He was in
the
there.
synagogue.
Yeah.
He was in the church house. He wasn't
Yeah.
out in the streets. This tells you where the religious system was. It was evil.
That's a good. I never really thought of it like that. The fact that the guy was in there is a symptom of how corrupt the place was.
Right. And how much Satan had a hold on the church
Yeah.
of the day.
That's cool. That's an interesting imagery. Yeah, I like that a lot. I was thinking more of kind of what your first point of they were in it just for, right, the Pharisees would have been at the kind of the top of the caste system that they would have had set up. And so, yeah, I mean, they probably would have studied and did all the work and knew all the right words, right, so they could, be comfortable in the society. But how much it actually meant to them, well, apparently very little that we can see, because as you said, Jesus keeps hammering them over and over again. And they're the one, because again, they're the ones that Jesus should have went to begin with, right? They're the ones that studied, right, and knew the law. These fishermen didn't know that. I mean, they would have known parts of it, but so good point. So we already have the imagery there, like God is searching for hearts, not for knowledge, which we'll come back to in a second. So not as the teachers of the law. Just then a man in their synagogue who was possessed by an impure spirit cried out, "What do you want with us, Jesus of Nazareth? Have you come to destroy us? I know who you are, the Holy One of God." "Be quiet," verse 25 said Jesus sternly, "come out of him." So, moving forward, we have a guy who's in the synagogue possessed. Maybe he was, in and out. It doesn't give details, right? He got into the synagogue, so he must not have been like that other demon-possessed guy living in the tombs, right? He must have been a little more palatable, right, to be inside society, but still demon-possessed. And he says, "What do you want with us?" He just cried out. This is like Jesus is teaching, right? And I guess the demon couldn't take it anymore or whatever. He says, "Why are you here? What do you want with us?" Jesus of Nazareth, which is a title. I mean, technically it's correct. Jesus of Nazareth, well, Jesus was from Nazareth, right? That's a technically correct title. And then he comes into the end of this little sentence and he says, "I know who you are, the Holy One of God." Also a title, also correct. So it is interesting that he goes from this earthly title to this heavenly title. He's admitting that he knows who he is. He's asking, like, why are you here? Have you come to destroy us? Which means that there's an actual question Like, are you here to destroy us, just like it reads? Or maybe it's inferred, are you here to destroy us now? Maybe there's an inferred time period. It's not clear. I've read a few commentaries that go either way. It's interesting. I don't know how much it applies to us, unless you're demon possessed, and then, in which case, see Kenny afterward. So what is this piece? What are we gleaning from this piece right here? Let's think of demon possession, because that's the thing that stands out most to me. Where else do we see demon possession before this? Or do we see it? Do we see demon possession in the Old Testament? Need a little Jeopardy theme song.
Well, I'm thinking, God hardened Pharaoh's heart. That doesn't mean he was demon possessed.
No.
Um,
Don't feel bad. I couldn't either. I couldn't think of any time where we saw it. It was sort of talked about it was talked about in the Psalms, but 1 Samuel, it talks about when David would play the harp or the lute for Saul, and it would it says, the wording is like, it would soothe his spirit. And then as he would not play, the spirit would come back. So it's not crystal clear, right? In the scripture, this is the first, especially if we're thinking of Mark as being the first gospel written, right? This is the first account that we really see of demon possession in the Bible. In the Protestant Bible. If you're Catholic or into the Apocrypha, you'll see there is a reference in Tobit, which has a reference there about demon possession. But in the Protestant Bible, this is what we see. Now you say, Clint, what are we supposed to do with it? Well, I think right here, we've got this fork in the road. When we're talking about demon possession, especially today, is it real? If so, what is it versus just being plain out crazy? And how are we to deal with this as a Christian? So, I'll kind of start us off. I don't think we have a choice to say that demon possession is real. It's treated as real in the Bible. In fact, we see later on that part of the apostle, part of what Jesus was doing was preaching the good word and driving out demons, it says. And then he sends his apostles to go do the same thing. So it's real. Then the next question is, does it apply today? And we're kind of going along this line of like speaking in tongues. Was it real? Well, yes, Acts totally says it was real, acts like it's real. There's no, you can't write it down to figurative language or interpretation, right? It's treated as real, but is that a gift that is really in use today? When we see examples of what was the point of demon possession? What was the point of speaking in tongues?
To reveal to the Jews that the Gentiles could be filled with the Holy Spirit.
Okay, so it had a purpose, right? Now we as Baptists think that purpose has been fulfilled, and so we don't really see this gift anymore. Now that's not no means saying it can never happen again, but it's not widespread, right? So what do we think? Can we apply that principle to this demon possession? What was the purpose of demons here? Because we don't see it. We just said we don't see it before, really. And now all of a sudden, just so happens the Son of God shows up on earth, and now all of a sudden we're seeing demons.
My little-
Seems like a mighty big coincidence.
My little notes down here says demon possession intended to torment and destroy those who are created in God's image.
Okay. Demon possession intended to what? Destroy those created in God's image, which is man. So let's think about this. Jesus has just gotten out of the wilderness, being tempted by Satan. So Satan was trying to get Jesus on his side. This was a literal temptation, right? Satan wanted Jesus on his side. That's not going to happen. So now Satan's like, well, we got to stop this guy before he even gets started. And so demons go into overtime, right? That's one way to think of it. Now, is it widespread today? That's kind of what I'm trying to get at. Because this is an interesting question.
There are plenty of cultures around Earth that still truly believe in demon possession, and I'm not going to say it's not real.
Okay. So plenty of cultures around the world believe in demon possession. True. And I'm not saying it's not real. What I'm saying is it widespread like what we see in the Gospels? Because the Gospels, we see a lot of demons, really. A lot of demons at a time. Are they still here? Is it that widespread today? Or was it for a particular time, a particular purpose? Because we see some terrible stuff in the news, right? Yeah. This is what I'm getting at. I mean, this is real practical stuff. We see some terrible stuff in the news. And some things, I'm like, people can be terrible on their own, right? But then some things you just hear about, and it's like, how in the world can that even happen, right? So
There's either some very, very evil people, or there are some very demon-possessed people.
yeah.
I think we have both.
Or both, yeah, there's both. And then what is the church's response? Call Kenny. Yes, I like it.
Don't call me.
So we'll leave off on this thought. So the idea of exorcism, right, which is this what the church has decided to call this casting out of demons, right, is a real thing. I know we like to kick the Catholics, but really we branch off of them, and there's so much history. The Catholics have a protocol for exorcism, right? And they have to be very accurate in their diagnosis. And part of it is, are they just crazy? Are they just disturbed? People go through terrible stuff all the time. And then there is also supervision. Like, as a Catholic priest, you can't just go exorcisming. You have to have the guidance or permission of your bishop up above you. And we have kind of lost that in the Protestant world. And in our scientific age, we'll come across many people that just doesn't exist, right? Which is kind of weird to me, because we believe in a God, and if you don't believe demons exist, then you believe in Satan. But that's a whole other issue, right? But I think I think what we learn here in Mark is demon possession, demons, evil spirits are just as real as pure spirits, the Holy Spirit. And when we read on, we learn that there is a whole spiritual battleground happening outside of us, under the water, so to speak, if we're going to go back to my previous. And maybe that's why we're not catching fish, right? There's sharks and stuff swimming around, scaring them all away. We don't know. I will leave you on that thought, because we're out of time. We're actually over time. So you guys got to pick up the pace. We're never going to make it. Uh-oh. Kenny.
Just a quick thought. You said some things that and maybe I get way out there, and I understand sometimes I do, but just looking at other scripture and things, Jesus first demonstrated his authority in the scriptures. They were amazed at how he read the scriptures.
Mhm.
Now he's demonstrating his authority in the spiritual realm. They recognized who he was, acknowledged him as a man from Nazareth,
Mhm.
and as the Son of God. So they not only acknowledged him as man, but as God. And now you said, well, that you see a lot of demons and stuff during Jesus' time. I think it because God was on the scene. They may not have really seen it all through the Old Testament because the presence of God was not as powerful as it was in his Son. So now all heaven and hell are coming together.
Mhm.
So it's a war. Satan's wanting to stop Jesus from going to the cross. Jesus is demonstrating his authority over the demons.
Yeah.
You know, he cast them out. He said, you go and shut your mouth. It doesn't say they kept talking.
No.
They obeyed him.
Obeyed immediately.
So
Yeah.
they acknowledged who he was, and he demonstrated who he was to have an authority over them.
And it
Mhm.
says that they knew who he was, so he didn't have to do any elaborate exorcism or anything. He just spoke, and that was enough.
Yeah. He just spoke it, and it came into existence. And yeah, I mean that's kind of what I was getting at, Kenny, is when we see God on the scene, and this is another application. When we see God on the scene, we see Satan there opposing him, right? Now you can apply that to your life. You can apply that to our stupid internet connection right here, right? When we're on the scene trying to do something for God, Satan's always there trying to disable that, right? Block it. There's a war, right? And you're moving up to the front line, you start to see more and more of it. So.
Jesus said, I've come to reveal all truth.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's physical and spiritual.
Yeah.
And so he was bringing out how bad demonic activity was in the world.
Yeah.
And he had authority over it.
Agreed. And there's so many different layers, right, to this. I mean, we could definitely go to 10 o'clock just talking about this stuff, right? And, you know, you get out what you put in. That's all I got to say.
And they also know that they're doomed. Are you going to destroy us now, or is that coming later?
Yeah. It's like, is that now, or you're ahead of time, Jesus?
They acknowledge their fate, their final fate.
So we wouldn't have to deal with it today.
Yeah, well, yeah. There's
A lot in that verse.
what is God's plan here, right? You know, he picks fishermen and all wrong, God, all wrong. Could have done it my way. No, it doesn't make sense to man. So, well, I hope you enjoyed it. We'll close in a word of prayer, and we'll get ready for next time. Father, thank you for this opportunity for us to come together once again to study your word and just go as deep as you allow us to go. I thank you for these people here, and I thank you for opening our hearts to your word. I pray that you'll watch over us and keep us safe and allow us to learn and apply these concepts in our daily lives as we serve you. In Jesus' name I ask. Amen.
Amen.
Well, thank you all.
Thank you.
13 person?
Hmm?
13 person?
Did we do 13? It's like a record. 16 through... Sweet.
Thank you for being willing to do this.
Yeah, man.
for
Well,
sure.
thank you for sending your questions, and y'all pray for me because I'm about to go take out some frustration on that cell phone.